Hi, how you doing, everybody? Thank you for being here. I picked a subject I think everybody was afraid of, and that was environmental and cultural influences in moku-hanga. And I kind of bent that to my will. Basically, what I would like to do is just talk about some of the techniques that I've used as an instructor, professor, and also as a printmaker, to try to integrate what I've learned from the apprentice kind of model. So I'm not going to really read through these things necessarily. When I give lectures, I allow you guys to read it too, so I'm not going to follow it completely. But I just wanted to show you a few things that I've done as an introduction. So I've got some of my prints up here and a few examples of some of my assignments, one of which is what you have in your hand. But I've been doing this since 1996, off and on, more off than on, because I've become head of an art program, and that is a complete ton of suck. But so it's kept me from really doing a lot of work. But these are my most recent pieces here that you can see up front also, and you're welcome to come up here after it. Please ask any questions you want. And then this last one was a design for Mokuhanga's Patreon. That's a David Bull production. So I'm getting more, since I'm not head of an art program, I'm getting more and more into Mokuhanga again, and I'm just really enjoying the heck out of it. I think that also my students have responded to my enthusiasm about this, and I've integrated my Mokuhanga practice into my normal printmaking introductory and printmaking 2 classes. This is the University of North Georgia, which is north of Atlanta, not the Republic of Georgia, which I've been asked. So I just want to kind of get around to my points kind of in an oblique way. I was an illustrator, commercial illustrator, before I became a professor, and I felt like a lot, excuse me, thank you, thanks for writing that. I felt like I learned so much by watching other people work. We all, I feel like, have a tendency of getting into our own bubbles, per se, and just watching people that are better than you, to me, is golden. There's nothing better. And how do I take that to a student, per se? So anyway, these are some of my previous work for different corporations. So my most recent kind of experience of seeing better printers, better carvers than I am, was spending a month at Mokuhanga in Tokyo. And what I've tried to do there is to not only watch how to work, but also take blocks that were carved better than I can carve. And more as kind of as an assignment for myself to improve. And I should have had a detail, but some of the techniques that I was allowed to use these blocks really pushed me and made me understand that connection between good carving and good printing. I think oftentimes with students, they don't see the whole kind of synergistic aspects of things. So what I did throw down is to carve, let me say something, carve a block, and they printed it with my supervision, blah, 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 which I'll get to in a second. But I know most people, does anybody in here teach students? Okay, great, great, excellent. So you can relate, I think. So the target audience I'm referring to is 18 to 24. And oftentimes I feel like they want immediate gratification. They love to have something that they can have and hold and to be inspired with. So they love Japanese love the prints, but when you start teaching these things, oftentimes I feel like their enthusiasm wanes very quickly because, oh my God, how much work is this? Can I hear an amen? Amen. All right. So how do you feed that kind of like, feed them, you know? And so allowing them to print with these blocks that simple blocks that I've made, really has been a great boon for them. It takes extra time, but I feel like it just kind of, starting almost kind of the end and going backwards, it allows them to see the potential and kind of get juiced and fired up about it. So anyway, this is one of my students with a print, a cat licking himself, which I thought was fun. And of course, you know, when you start these projects, it's very daunting. For them, for me, and so what I did was I signed this, and of course it's kind of shameless self-promotion because this is my print company, Tanuki Prints. So I made them kind of do advertisements for me. So it's kind of a combination. But the senja fuda, if you're probably familiar with that, are these small labels that were for shrines originally. If you've seen these temples, they're pasted all over the place, and I just love the graphics of it. It's just very exciting, the combination of typography and imagery oftentimes. So I tried to design these things so that the students would have just enough kind of challenge them enough, have a few technical points that they might find later on in common with their projects. So it gives it confidence, helps them understand good carving, and also how to get rich color too, you know, because oftentimes, even if we give demos, oftentimes the color is kind of weak, and I wanted them to have something that they can kind of use as a template later on. So what I asked them to do is kind of get into this production aspect of this, because as you know, these prints, these wonderful ukiyo-e prints, it was a commercial venture, right? And they were printing so many of them. And I feel like, to some degree, they're starting from the bottom. I mean, meaning the beginners, the apprentices, they were making, way back when, they were printing candy wrappers, right? And if they printed those candy wrappers really well, they might go to matchbook covers. And if they did matchbook covers, they keep going and going and going and refining and this idea of the students themselves hungering to create something, pushing themselves to a large degree. So when you'll notice this is a really crap print, right, relatively. I mean, and so they do about 30 of these prints initially. Hopefully, when they get 5 of them that are really good, then I allow them to go on to their next project. I don't assign a grade to this, but it's more that kind of integration of the apprenticeship, this idea that you achieve something and allows you to go on the next step. Now, as a printer, I learn too, every time I do this, you know, just like drawing, you can't print enough, right? I can't print enough. When I'm there doing 100, 200 prints, my mind wanders. I make mistakes, all that kind of stuff. And students with their cell phones, I mean, you've got even worse than that problem, right? So anyway, I feel like that idea of focusing, that idea of quality control, of attention, really, really, it's done wonders for the students, in my opinion, and wonders for me too. But like, you know, I evaluate them, and then they evaluate their own prints too. They say, okay, what's the problem here? Diagnosing these things. You can see the notation. So they have a lot of fun doing it. They give them to their family, and they give them to y'all, and they were very pleased to be a part of this. So thank you for allowing me to, and if you haven't gotten your free print, if you want a couple, that's fine. Great. They make great bookmarks. So anyway, that's kind of what I do initially. Now later on, and this is rare that I have students that quite get to this point, I've got blocks that just practice blocks, and this idea of color overlapping, you know, how do you get these wonderful colors, and how can you kind of strategize to make the blocks as efficient as possible, to think in advance on how to design a print that uses those concepts of color overlapping and transparency. So I've had only about 5 students get to this point. So admittedly, this is a work in progress, but I find this to be very useful for myself too. You know, trying new color combinations and that type of thing. A few technical stuff. I mean, it's hard to get material. I generally buy all the stuff for them because if they're really that interested, I go ahead and contribute. But and we use watercolor tubes and things like that just to keep things at a little minimum. The paper is probably the biggest problem. And this is the type that I use, just printing paper, which I think is what I use for the centrifuge that you have. Anyway, I guess I don't want to kind of. What time is it now? Is it 3?
I think, yeah, sure, you have a half an hour, so.
Okay. Well,
you got your half past.
okay, well, that's great. I was told that maybe I would have an interview, and I was worried about that, so I kind of kept it short. Well, can I open it up to you guys a little bit in terms?
Well, why do you freeze them? Freeze the paper.
Okay, great. So to keep the mold down, so if I have a Tuesday, Thursday class, I really worry about they might take a full month on a print. And so putting it in the freezer every morning, after class and then getting it out in the morning is the way that really we get around that. I think for students it's such a laborious process and it takes so much time doing these prints that you worry about that. But
So is that, I mean, do you not let the paper dry?
Eventually, yeah. Yeah, eventually we flatten that. But yeah, so we use newsprint in the stack, really thick on the top and really thick on the bottom for both the to be printed and after being printed. And this bundles up, and we do kind of a chew-on size, relatively small size. So there's enough room for the students to put it into a small freezer and stack it. I have to come in every morning at around 7 and pull those stacks out for a 9 o'clock class so that they're ready to go. I've had a few problems before in which I've had to put it into a heating, silkscreen heating bin to help the process. Yeah. Yes. Andrew,
what's the time frame of your classes? You know, how long?
Yeah. So
how long do you have the students for them to go through both the center's out product and their own print projects?
All right. So I only have one set of blocks with the centrifuga yet. So that's one thing too. Is I have some of them printing, some of them designing their imagery and that kind of stuff on the computer is how I do that. So it kind of helps to balance it. It's like a multitasking situation. So my classes are about 2.5 hours. Fortunately, the printmaking lab is open all the time except for Sunday. So I have a lot of students that have to come in anytime and work on it. But one thing I found useful too is that I've got 2 printing stations in the print lab. One that I'm not always printing, but I'm frequently printing. And so they're next to me. So if you've ever, I just love working with somebody. I mean, admittedly, I guess I'm better than they are because I've been doing it a lot longer. But having that kind of stealing is what they say, stealing the technique. And you can as you know, you can read, you can look at YouTube videos, which is helpful also, but having it there, getting the sound of it, to me is quite a key too. You know, it just sounds right. You know, it's one of those ineffable things you just have a very difficult time defining. So having somebody working next to you is just wonderful. How many of you guys have been able to watch other people print next to you? Everybody? Yeah, yeah. So, do you agree with me on that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. When I started using these techniques, they would just get so frustrated, and that's why I feel like using blocks really kind of keeps that energy up. Yeah, great.
Could you speak a little bit more about working or designing on a computer and how you translate that to wood block?
Yeah, sure, sure. So what's kind of helped me is combining this old and new, you know, in terms of creating new classes and kind of integrating it digitally. So the students will design these things on the computer itself, and then we will take a print of that and paste it onto the block and do it traditionally from there. So yeah, using a Gompi laminate kind of thing. So it's a very thin paper laminated with spray melt onto a sheet of paper. Then it's run through the laser writer. Then that's pasted down using yes paste generally, and then laying that down with a Kento. So that's how we kind of start with that. And then later on, they use the printouts, the color printouts that design, but they will do their, of course, their key block and use that with the consecutive colors later on using that same kind of technique over and over again. So, man, I'll tell you what, it wears me out doing this stuff because there's so much there. The most students I've had at one time were 8, and I don't want to do that again. I'm so happy that it's not too popular, because 15, I'd blow my brains out with all this kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah, please, thank you.
In that context, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of background about the department, you know, where your course, the Moku-hanga course fits into your department, what the reception is from colleagues, and
Yeah.
just general status or popularity of it,
Well,
more broadly speaking.
as you probably know, there's a lot of education that goes along with that. I tout the non-toxic aspect of things. Our dean is very into Asian studies. I've been working that like nobody's business. But in terms of just bang for the buck as far as time and resources, they see how much time and effort and my own money goes into it. That kind of makes them say that they can't say no to this kind of stuff. So far, I've only had a student through 3 semesters, which is a year and a half, using strictly moku-hanga. So you get to a point where it's just independent study, and I do that for free, and I'm a sucker. But looking at the end result, and I'm sure you guys feel this way too, you see this, and I've had some students that are just, they can't not do this. There's something about this. Now, if I can just wean them out of the anime world a little bit, that would be great. But there is some kind of, I don't know, help me here. What is it about these things? What is it about this, the look of this so beautiful? I mean, it integrates the paper aspect. I used to teach paper making, which was really wonderful. We do the paper and also the printing, but I haven't been able to do that lately in terms of numbers. But it's just such an integral part of the whole process. So I would just love to be in a position so that I could, you know, have a degree in this. Which, how many other institutions, if you don't mind me asking, I'm going to ask you a question, is that okay? How many institutions do you guys know of in the world, the United States, that integrate that into the college curriculum?
Surprisingly, John is the University of Hawaii in Hilo has a great papermaking department. Or is just their during a class with their students, and they have had a strong paper making program for the last 6 years. So that was a surprise to me, though.
Yeah.
But that's in Hilo on the Big Island.
Wow.
But I taught
Yeah,
paper
please.
making here
Oh.
in the art department,
Oh, great, great. And
through the fiber department.
what was your, how did it go with you?
We would start off with, we do Japanese, and then we do Western, then we move.
Oh, really?
And one of the things I realized is the students took me paper, and it was a pretty full class of 12 to 15,
Wow.
and they would get, what's the word, I mean, they think the paper is the art, then you have to remind them that that's the media, then they have to move on, you know what I mean?
It becomes precious, right?
Yeah, and then we did a whole section in recycled paper. So, they had to do a natural thing that they found, and we did recipes. I have books on different recipes of different plants. And so, some worked, some didn't, but at least we knew if it worked or didn't, or we had to do combinations of adding avocado. But then I shifted from the art department to Hawaiian studies, and I teach copper making, bark cloth. So we start off with bark cloth, then we take our leftover wall case and we make paper. So we still make paper, then we take it into books and printmaking.
Isn't there a Walla Walla, Washington has a program in
Yeah, she's here.
She's
Can you
here.
hear her?
I'd love it
Yeah.
to talk to
She's
them.
speaking next.
Next.
Oh, great.
I do-
Yeah.
That's great.
Also, in Finland, we have got also paper making, there is a paper making studio, special for Japanese paper making also, all the tools are there. It's not in art college or art university, but it is connected. And also in art academy, they have got the equipments and there are courses, but lately it has been the Western paper making, because it's much easier to press and do. The Japanese paper making needs more space, needs the drying boards, there's lots of things to consider, but it used to be popular in the beginning of 90s. So I was teaching also paper making, about Japanese paper making. But nowadays it has switched back to the Western because of the easiness and kind of a space problem. But the equipments are there, so I'm looking forward to use them again someday, probably. So it is set up there. So Finland is advanced
Yeah, yeah.
culture.
Well, Gaita, I was there
Yeah.
for the Soraya conference.
Come and see.
They really did that to all of their making and everything. So, any other questions you guys have? Yeah, please.
This is for all of you,
Please.
that teach in printmaking programs. The term moku-hanga, how many of you use, is that term not strictly your own usage, but within the department or the advertising of the course, moku-hanga is used? And John, I was wondering,
Yeah, I'm
at
sorry.
your university, do you,
You know, I
is your
don't,
course pitched as
It-
a moku-hanga course?
thank you.
or-
I kind of done the Trojan horseman, and in terms of, it's during my printmaking one that I introduced that along with Western techniques. So it's a combination of the two. It's not in the description of the class at all.
Even though it is strictly
Yeah,
moku-hanga?
yeah.
Okay, is there anyone else to comment on the use of that term, or?
Well, again, Finland is advanced.
Yes.
So in Aalto University, it's another big art university in Finland, besides the art academy. The moku-hanga courses, there are 2 times spring season course and the autumn, and they are always fully booked up. And so 30 people or something queuing up, waiting to
Wow.
cancel. And
Wow.
there is the feared 15 students. They have to take it full, and it's hard to teach 15, I know. 6 is best,
Yes, that's,
maximum,
you're right,
yes.
you're right. I'm with
But
you.
I think I go to,
I have to translate it into Italian, so it's called moku-hanga, I call it Japanese printing.
yes,
And then I specify further, water-based, and printing.
yes, the water taste is
Jennifer,
very
with your
attractive.
students.
I just talk about what I do. I haven't introduced woodblock yet. I'm still new, but I use up the ring and other elements.
Okay, and we have two people from the Hong Kong Open Print Shop here, Ho Yin and Young. Your print shop has increasing interest in moku-hanga, correct? I mean, is that a fair statement?
Perhaps Young can talk about the print shop, I can talk about the university maybe later on.
Yeah.
I think because I would say because we won't use the terms of moku-hanga, we'll use with printing, no matter it's water-based or oil-based. So I think it's the most accessible media amongst all those printing techniques. So actually we work with the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and the time you have 15 weeks. How many weeks?
We have 5.
5 weeks. Well, so we did really basic technique and let the student fry. So I think that's really, to me, it's quite interesting that I taught them really simple technique in order they don't get cut. And then and then for the rest of the 4 weeks, and they explore the media themselves. Of course, we just offer some basic technique like the carving technique, inking technique, and stuff. And as the lady is gone. As you said, there's some work, some didn't. But I think it's a good experimental opportunity for them to get an idea of what printing is. And we start introducing. We are hoping in the future that the Japanese printing type, because we have artists practicing it now, amongst of the Chinese traditional technique.
Well, in my case, the woodblock thing is just part of the image subject. So out of the 14 or 13 weeks, I have to squeeze 4 or 5 sections into it, in order students can be open to this kind of technique or imaging. So that's my basic kind of concern. So whether they want to do it in their later years or not, it's up to them. And like you said, if they come out okay, it's good. Otherwise, it's just like they're just exposed to one of those imaging techniques, and that's it.
I see.
It's not much expectation out of it.
Okay.
Just an exposure.
Conversation very much.
Yes, please. Thank you very much
All right.
for helping.
Thank you, John.